hand-carved double-hull canoe 60 feet long holds a course southeast by the stars. The year is approximately 1150 CE. The nearest land is 3,000 miles behind it. You've been told that no one crossed this ocean with purpose until 1492, that the Americas were sealed from the Eastern world until a Genoese sailor accidentally found them. The DNA says otherwise. The stone figures of Easter Island stand with their backs to the sea. That is the detail almost every documentary tells you. What almost no documentary tells you is what their builders carried in their blood. Easter Island, Rapa Nui, sits in the southeastern Pacific, 2,300 miles from the coast of Chile. It is one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth. The people who first settled it were extraordinary navigators, descendants of a seafaring civilization that had already crossed half the Pacific by the time Europe was still hugging its coastlines. They arrived on Rapa Nui sometime around 1200 CE, and when scientists sequenced the genomes of their pre-contact descendants, they found something that the standard model of human prehistory cannot easily accommodate. 10 to 16% of the ancestry in pre-European Rapa Nui skeletal remains is Native American, not Polynesian, not European. The remains predate European arrival. Native American, South American, from a continent that, according to the history most of us were taught, had no contact with the outside world until Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic in 1492. That gap, 340 years, is the subject of this video. The accepted explanation for the peopling of the Pacific has always centered on Polynesia as the endpoint, not a waypoint. The orthodox model holds that Polynesians migrated eastward across the Pacific, settling Hawaii, New Zealand, and finally Easter Island as the farthest reach of one of history's great maritime civilizations. Full stop. The Americas were separate. The Atlantic was Columbus's domain. The Pacific was a barrier, not a corridor. Thor Heyerdahl challenged part of that model in 1947 when he sailed the Kon-Tiki raft from Peru westward to French Polynesia, arguing that South Americans had populated the Pacific Islands. He was a gifted adventurer and a provocative thinker. He was also wrong about the direction. The Kon-Tiki voyage proved that drift from South America to Polynesia was physically possible. What it could not prove was what actually happened, and the DNA evidence has since made the directionality unambiguous. The Polynesians went east, not the other way around. In 2020, a team led by Alexander Ioannidis at Stanford published a genomic study in Nature that changed the terms of this debate permanently. They analyzed the genomes of 807 individuals drawn from 17 Polynesian island populations and 15 Native American groups spanning the Pacific coast, from Colombia to Chile. The study was not looking for a sensational result. It was mapping the genetic architecture of Pacific settlement, a systematic, methodologically conservative analysis designed to exclude noise. What it found was not noise. Across Eastern Polynesian populations, Marquesas, Cook Islands, Rapa Nui, a clear Native American admixture signal appeared. The segment lengths of the Native American DNA within Polynesian genomes, segment length being the forensic measure of how long ago two populations interbred, placed the contact event at approximately 1150 CE. Not 1492. Not after European contact. Not explainable by contamination. 800 years before Columbus set sail, Polynesians and Native Americans had exchanged DNA. The critics raised the obvious objection immediately. Could this signal be a post-European artifact? Could it reflect colonial-era mixing that the model was misinterpreting as ancient? The researchers anticipated this. The segment length analysis is precisely the tool that distinguishes recent admixture from ancient admixture. Recent mixing produces long, intact chromosomal segments. Ancient mixing produces shorter, more broken segments from generations of recombination. The Native American signal in Polynesian genomes shows the fragmented signature of 25 to 30 generations of separation. That is not post-Columbian contamination. That is an object's prevent, placed firmly in the 11th to 13th century CE. More recent computational reanalysis, using AI-assisted genomic tools capable of processing population-level data at a scale unavailable to earlier researchers, has not weakened this conclusion. It has sharpened it. The admixture signal is not confined to one island, which is what you would expect from a single accidental drift event. It is distributed across 17 populations, weighted most heavily toward the southeastern Pacific, the populations geographically closest to the South American coast. The pattern is not consistent with a storm-wrecked canoe. It is consistent with repeated, purposeful contact. Now consider what the Polynesians had. They possessed star navigation accurate enough to locate islands the size of a thumbnail on a planet-sized ocean. They had double-hull voyaging canoes capable of sailing against the wind, not just with it, which is something Hired Al's Kon-Tiki raft explicitly could not do. They had already crossed 5,000 miles of open Pacific before they ever approached the American coast. The idea that they could not have made the final 2,000 miles to South America deliberately and returned is not a scientific position. It is an assumption born from underestimating what these people were capable of. The sweet potato makes the case biological. Ipomoea batatas, the sweet potato, was domesticated in South America. Its genetic origin is unambiguous, yet it was present across Polynesia, from the Cook Islands to Hawaii, by at least 1000 CE, centuries before any known European voyage anywhere near the Pacific. And the Quechua word for sweet potato, kumar, maps so directly onto the Polynesian word kumara that linguists have no viable alternative explanation other than direct transmission. A plant, its name, and its cultivation practice crossed the Pacific before Columbus was born. The chicken evidence is more contested. In 2007, researchers reported finding chicken bones at an archaeological site in Arauco, Chile, radiocarbon, dated to between 34 and 1424 CE before Columbus, with genetic markers consistent with Polynesian breeds, not European ones. Subsequent analysis complicated that finding, and the debate over the Arauco chickens has not been fully resolved. The evidence suggests Polynesian-South American contact extended to the exchange of domesticated animals. The evidence does not yet prove it definitively. That distinction matters. What the genome data does prove definitively is the human exchange, and that is what cannot be argued away. The Polynesians reached America. The DNA of living people carries that fact. Every person alive today who traces ancestry to Eastern Polynesia carries a measurable fraction of pre-Columbian Native American DNA. That is not sarin metaphor. It is a biological record written in the genome and readable with the same tools we use to diagnose inherited disease. The people most affected by this finding are Rapa Nui descendants who carry the strongest signal, up to 16% Native American ancestry in their pre-contact genomic heritage, and the Native American communities of the South American Pacific coast. Likely ancestral Zenu, or closely related Colombian coastal populations whose ancestors sailed north and east in canoes they never recorded in writing, but whose genes remember the journey. What this finding asks us to reconsider is not merely a Columbus story. It asks us to reconsider what isolation means and who we designate as capable of breaking it. For centuries, the default assumption has been that the Americas were sealed, that the Atlantic was the only door, and that European hands were the only hands capable of opening it. The genome is a correction to that assumption. It is not a small correction. The question the evidence leaves open is the one that may matter most. What did they find when they got there? What did they trade beyond a plant and possibly a bird? And why, across 17 island populations, spread across thousands of miles of ocean, did they not leave more of a material record? The DNA remembers. The stone does not always speak. That silence is not absence. If your ancestry connects to Polynesia or the Pacific coast of South America, or if you simply assumed Columbus was first, what does it mean to you that this contact happened 1,000 years earlier than history taught you? Tell me in the comments what you assumed before this video and whether anything has changed.